Alright guys, so before we start this video, we're going to lower because the camera is a little bit funky and it's dropping on the tripod, but we'll do our best. Before this video gets started, we just hit 25,000 subscribers. It happened on my birthday, so thank you to everybody that hit that subscribe button. Really helped us out. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Have a little bit of a lofty goal. It's almost December. Well, it's the middle of November. I want to hit 30,000 by the end of this year. So if you guys are about to watch this video and you are not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Try to get to 30,000 by the end of the year. That would be amazing. So thanks guys, let's get to the video. What is going on, everybody? So I swear to God, you guys are gluttons for punishment. And the reason I say that is because the more of these crazy Jeep videos that I make, the more you guys watch them. Like, I was so nervous in the beginning that when I started doing nothing but Jeeps in every Jeep video I made, that you guys are going to be like, oh great, here we go, another Jeep video. But for some reason or another, all of you love these things. And you keep telling me to make them and make more of them and do more of them, and for that I thank you very much, because that's super cool. I truly enjoyed doing these Jeeps, and I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day, and you know, it was actually kind of comical because we were talking about how each one of these Jeeps has this immense story, and these stories just never stop with these things. Every one of them has some sort of an emotional story tied to it, so fixing them actually makes me feel good because I'm making somebody else feel good. So it's kind of a win-win-win situation here. You guys love watching them, I love doing them, and our customers are attached to them and they love getting them back and saving them. So thank you, it's awesome. But here we got another one. This one came off of an island, as you can tell, because it left some of itself on the island before it came here. But this one's a typical, you know, it's a 2004. And it's got some issues. You can see the frame underneath here is cracking and disappearing. We could probably put our finger or a hammer directly through that. Some issue here, and then, you know, the typical holes by the front control arms. This one is pretty bad on this side. Actually has a pretty decent sized hole in it where the control arm mount is almost completely disconnected. And then, you know, the skid plate area, the rear control arm area. You know, your typical Jeep. So this one is going to be a lot of replacing stuff. We're doing a full lift kit. We're doing the shocks, springs. We're doing an exhaust system on it. We're doing the gas tank skid plate because that's got a nice big hole in it. It just falls apart. And then we're doing little miscellaneous items like pinion seal in the rear, pinion seal in the front. Few other odds and ends that need to be done. We're going to do front brakes and rotors on this one because they're just rusty roddy. I'd like to thank, though, whoever anti-seized the crap out of this thing, because it's making my life a whole lot easier in the fact that everything's coming apart. So just real quick, I wanted to show you guys a couple differences here, and apologize, a fly just flew into my freaking mouth. Ugh. All right, so some of the differences, like I've told you guys, I showed you guys on the LJ video that I did. There's a couple of differences with the 03 to 06 Jeeps from the 97 to 02s. The main difference is this skid plate right here. This skid plate mount does not exist on the 97 to 02. It's only on the 03 to 06, and it is an extended skid plate that covers the bottom half of the transmission and then ties into the main skid plate. And then on the main skid plate, the bolts on this side are all in the same distance apart. And on the opposite side, they are, again, the same distance apart. Whereas on the 97 to 02, there's actually a cutout right here. And then this bolt is further up this way. And so all these holes are offset. And then, of course, on the 03 to 06, you get the smaller Mercedes steering box and a couple little frame modifications to fit that steering box. But other than that, these are pretty much identical to a 97 to 02. Those are just the small minor differences that exist on the 03 to 06s. So same goes for the LJ as well. And then everything else is identical. So we're gonna go through this one. We're gonna clean it up, cut the frame out, do all that stuff. I have my little GoPro session that I'll throw up on the lift so that you guys can actually see some cutting and welding action. And then, yeah. So let's get going on tearing this thing apart. All right, so as you guys probably saw, the most annoying part of these things is getting that skid plate off. And you can see the frame is gone, but these things just spin inside the frame and it makes it a nightmare to get it off. So I just bend it and hammer on it and they eventually do come off. But now you can see how truly bad this frame is. And how much is on the ground, which is crazy, and that's just not even cut out yet. But for those of you that might be questioning the integrity of this repair, I want to show you something. So up inside there, if you can see, the frame is, for all intents and purposes, fine. Nothing wrong with it. The rust stops right up about here, about halfway up. And yeah, there's no problem with the rest of that frame. So the whole top half of the frame is good. Even on this side. The whole top half of the frame is totally fine. So we're replacing all the way up to right about here. So about 1/4 of an inch from the top of the frame, which the top of the frame down to about halfway is still good. So we've got plenty of integrity, plenty of good metal to weld to, and plenty of structural integrity in this frame. So let me give you a little bit of the steps that we take to do these quicker in case you decide to do one on your own. So the first thing is you've got to tie up the transmission and transfer case before you can remove the skid plate, because it is the mount or the cross member for the transmission. So I built a little bar here that screws together, lays on top of the frame on both sides, and then I either chain it or I use an exhaust U-bolt or whatever I can find to hold this up here. Once you have that in place, you can get the skid plate off. Once you get the skid plate off, you're going to want to cut the exhaust system off. Now, I usually cut the muffler ends right about here. I cut the tailpipe off the muffler, and then I unbolt the muffler from the exhaust system here. And then I go ahead and I cut the exhaust right at the engine, leaving plenty of room on top so I can sneak a welder around there to get it welded back on. And the reason I do that is because this exhaust pipe comes extremely close to this side of the frame. Now, in order to get to this side of the frame properly, the exhaust has to be removed. You cannot weld this with the exhaust in place. Then once all that stuff is done, the exhaust is cut off, the skid plate is down, the transmission and transfer case are tied up. The last thing that we're going to do is start on the driver's side. So we need to remove all of the brake lines, the fuel lines, the electrical cables for the fuel pump and everything else. And what I do is I take all these little things and I pop them out of the frame, and then I zip tie them to this convenient little bracket right here. And that keeps everything back and out of the way, keeps everything off the top of the frame where we need to get all this off. Unbolt the brake line and the brake line hangs. Then you can do the upper control arm mount, remove that first, because that's the harder of the two to remove. If you do the bottom one first, it puts too much tension on it, you can't get it. Remove the top one first, remove the bottom one last. And now that we've got that, the sway bar links are next. You take sway bar links off and you just hang them down here. And from that point now, we are actually ready to cut this side of the frame out. And we got most of the rust and stuff knocked out of the frame because the plasma cutter has a hard time cutting through rust. So we want to knock out as much as we can, and that's what you see all over the floor. But now we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut the frame about halfway. So right at about that line, all the way down, we'll cut all this out. So we're going to cut all the way up to here. All this will come out, this lower control arm mount comes out, and everything else comes out. We do leave the body mounts intact, and we leave as much of this metal in the center intact as we can because we need to weld to it. And that's pretty much it for taking this thing apart. So now we're going to do the driver's side. We'll make sure the frame is straight. And let me just grab a tape measure and I'll show you guys what we do real quick. So basically, what you're going to want to do is, I'm not going to do it because I did it already, but you're going to want to pick a point on the frame. And usually I pick the point right behind the bumper here, right there. measure that down to the floor. You come over here and you do the same thing, measure this down to the floor, and you should, so long as the Jeep and the lift and everything else is level, your measurement should be good. And one of the things you can do to make sure that is take, like, you know, a long 4-foot level here, and we'll stick it across the bottom of the bumper, and we'll check to see. And for the most part, we're level. So with it being level, we know that our measurements that we take from this section of the frame and that section of the frame should match. If they don't match, then either the frame is twisted or something's a little funny. So then we go to the back and we do basically the same thing. We take this section of the frame right here where there's no bumper, there's no cross member, there's no nothing. That section of the frame right there, that section of the frame right there, and we measure down to the floor, and again we make sure that everything is straight. Then we'll do one more spot. If we have a decent amount of metal somewhere in the center of this frame, we'll take a measurement. If we don't have a decent amount of metal, then what we'll do is we'll measure from the bottom of this hole right here to the ground, and again the bottom of this hole to the ground on the other side, and just make sure that all of our measurements are matching. And the other thing that we can do too is we can kind of compare front to rear, and with the actual frame measurements from a body shop, you can determine how high this should be, how high that should be, compared to how high the front is. So you can technically front to back this and do all kinds of stuff. And then I'll measure it for square just to make sure that the frame is square. It's kind of a process. Most of these frames are pretty straight, and the ones that are not straight are bent upwards in the back like a banana because the frame broke. Or if they break right here, you can see them, they'll actually bend this way. And then once we put it up on the lift, everything closes back up again and we're good to go. But I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of a step-by-step as to what, you know, we do here. So we're going to get on with cutting this section of the frame out. And once we get this section cut out, I'll show you guys how we clean and prep it and get everything ready for the new piece. All right, so the first things we're gonna cut off are the upper control arm mount. That's gotta come off the frame, and then the actual mount where the sway bar link goes, we cut that out. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut down this way, and then cut across this way, which will get rid of all this here, and about half of this, and then we can chop that off. So that'll be the next thing that gets chopped off once we cut all the way through, and then we're just gonna cut all the way down the frame rail, and then we'll get to the other side. Okay, so the frame is all cut out, and as you guys probably saw in that, we were having some issues with spitback and a few other odds and ends, and that's because of all the rust that was inside the frame. When the plasma cutter comes in contact with the rust behind here, it just spits back because it's non-conductive and it won't cut through it. So now, next step is to clean up the frame to prepare it for the safety caps. Now, you get two ways you could do this. You could either sandblast it, which in some cases I do. Usually I sandblast these in here because it's hard to get anything in there to actually clean that up. So we'll hit those with the sandblaster, hit that with the sandblaster, and then I'm gonna come in here with a flap disc and just clean up all these top edges here. And we'll get a lot of the scale off of here and make sure there's no scaly rust or anything sticking out or whatever. And then on this side, you know, you guys got light in your eyes, but let's see if we can make it better. This side we had to go a little bit higher than I like normally, but no big deal. The rest of the frame is really, really good. So we'll clean out the rest of the scale that's up in here, make sure we get all that out of there, and we'll be good to go to pop the safety caps in. As far as the Jeep goes, we got driver's side done, all welded in, good to go. And now we got to move on to the passenger side, and there's just a couple more extras on the passenger side that you have to remove, one of which being this exhaust mount right here, this exhaust bracket. And 9 times out of 10 those two 13mm bolts will come right out. You do need a little bit of a swivel to get to them, but they will come right out. So you need to take that off, and that will get welded back onto the new frame stuff. And then other than that, the passenger side is identical to the driver's side. You can see how bad this thing is. It's just so horrific. Absolutely disgusting. But we're getting it. We just got the muffler in from FedEx. We're gonna try to do a little bit of something with this area right here because it is moved up into the actual tub itself, and we need to kind of stop this before it keeps going, and you know, the seatbelt mount comes apart and all kinds of other crap. So we got to be really careful with that and try to get some metal in there and, you know, seal that up a little bit. And then we got a few other odds and ends. We're waiting on the gas tank skid plate, and then we'll be able to get this thing moving. But I'm hoping that you guys are kind of getting a good idea of what it takes step by step to get one of these things done. Trying to explain every single step that I take with these, and we'll even go into how I pull the axle back into the control arm mounts and all that other stuff, and we'll show you how that gets done and how to put that back together without having to take the springs out and the shocks out, which we're doing anyway to put the lift kit on it. But thought it'd be interesting for you guys to see how you would do it in the stock form, because you can see they don't fit right now, but we'll get them there. And yeah, so we're moving right along. So here's what we're using to get these things back in line again. It's just a ratchet strap to the lower control arm mount in the front, running all the way back to the shock mount on the rear axle, and then you just crank it up. give it a couple good whacks, and then everything lines right back up. You can put the bolt in on the outside for the lower control arm, and then on the inside for the upper control arm, and everything is hunky-dory. And now we're just going to completely repeat the process on the passenger side and get this side of the frame done. Okie dokie, so now we got the passenger side completely done. And again, you know, typical, just like driver's side. See, on this one though, we had a little bit of an issue where got to get rid of that wire before anybody sees it and yells at me. But we had an issue where there was a gap here because all of the rot and everything. So we just made a little plate to stick up there and weld in. And the same thing on the inside, the outside. So it is all good. And now what we've got left is to put these control arms back in just like we did on the other side. Then we are going to replace the gas tank skid plate, which, by the way, if you guys are looking for one of these things, Rock Auto has the actual Mopar skid plate for 113 bucks. It is the best place to get these things. I don't care who else thinks that they have Jeep stuff like Quadratec and four-wheel parts and everything else, but the cheapest I found, the actual Mopar unit, is right on Rock Auto. So we're going to do the skid plate, and at the same time, while we have the fuel tank out, we're going to do the full lift kit. And I'm actually going to make that a separate video where we're going to do the gas tank skid plate and the lift kit on this Jeep. And should be pretty cool. We still have a couple little areas in here that we got to seal up. I mean, we can't really do too much for this other than seal it up and stop it from continuing. So we're going to do our best to make that work. And then we got to do some front brakes, and we got to do, I think the transmission cooler lines are leaking, which you can kind of see right there. So we got to do those. And then just a few other little odds and ends, and this one will be pretty much done. All right, guys, so I hope you really enjoyed that video. What I was trying to do with this one is kind of give you a little bit of a step-by-step. And to kind of finish it off is basically everything we did to remove the skid plate, remove all the suspension stuff, and remove the exhaust and all that. We just have to do all that in reverse to put all this back together. We'll throw a coat of paint on it and it'll be good to go. But what I was trying to do is just offer you guys a little bit more of a step-by-step to see what's involved in getting the Jeep prepared for the actual frame and then actually repairing the frame. So it is a process and it does take a little bit of time, but in the end, it's well worth it. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned, because in the next couple of days or so, we'll have the video on the lift kit along with replacing the gas tank skid plate. And then we're probably going to move on to building the exhaust for the Cutlass right there, which that should be really super nice. We're, as usual, going to be using all Stainless Bros stuff because they're the best. And we're going to be V-banding it, and it's going to be a really, really, really nice exhaust system. So stay tuned for that one as well. And also, thank you, all of you, that helped me to hit 25,000 subscribers on my birthday. That was the coolest thing ever. So thank you very much. I appreciate all of you. Again, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. And also, you know, hit that like button, because it tells the YouTube algorithm that you guys like what you're seeing, and it'll suggest it more often, and more of these videos will get out there, and it'll give me a chance to make more of these videos. So on that note, have a spectacular day, and I will see you all on the next one.